This is the Bizgnus Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Hypergrowth in multifamily real estate has led to white-hot competition for available properties, resulting in waiting lists of would-be buyers, all of whom seem ready and willing to take on more risk for less reward than ever before. But Sam Liebman, a seasoned investor in commercial property who's owned substantial interests in over 70 properties over the past 30 years, cautions that instead of getting caught up in the frenzy and making a reckless purchase, it's critical to carry out on-the-ground research. Mr. Liebman joins us for this Bizgnus Interview Podcast to talk about mastering the core fundamentals of real estate systematically, how to decipher where to increase value, and more. Sam, you have written a book about multifamily commercial real estate that implies we don't need to go to Harvard to be successful. Would you tell us what that book is?
The book is called Harvard Can't Teach What You Learn from the Streets. And it's a book that's basically trying to teach people the fundamentals of multifamily real estate. And that is that you must master the fundamentals to build upon. My promise is that after reading this book, you're not going to get rich, but my promise is that after reading this book, your knowledge of real estate, especially multifamily real estate, will increase exponentially. That's my promise.
What makes multifamily real estate so different that you have to write a book about it?
Well, that's a great question. I wanted to teach. I've been doing this. I've owned over 70 properties, every form in the world that I could think of. And what I want to do is multifamily, especially garden apartment complexes, contain all the basic fundamentals that you can carry over to any other sector. Once you learn the fundamentals of multifamily, then you can easily transition to office buildings or retail, et cetera. If I just focused on retail, there would be so many fundamentals that would be missed out.
Oh, give us a couple of examples of what are the basic fundamentals of multifamily that we must know.
Okay, the E equals MC square of real estate is understanding a formula, a simple formula. P equals N over C. And what that means is property value equals net operating income divided by what's called a cap rate. And let me go into how important that is. So this formula will teach you, assuming we're dealing in what's called a 5% cap rate. Right now, we're in a 3% cap rate in some instances. Back when I was buying buildings back in the 90s, we were in a 10% cap rate. Okay, so property value, which I focus on because it's about building wealth, is equal to every dollar you increase revenue or decrease in operating expense. In a 5 cap environment, you have increased property value $20. So property value would equal $1 in increased net operating income divided by 0.05. Now that is super, super powerful because that is the key, what I call the equals MC square of what real estate is all about. So for instance, if I look to reduce an operating expense, like I look at a building and I see the water and sewer on a garden multifamily 100-unit is $80,000 a year. And I know that it should be $60,000 a year based on my experience. There's water leaks that are undetected. So if somehow I can find that, fix it, I could increase my net operating income $5,000-$10,000 a year, which goes right to the bottom line. But more important, increases property value $200,000-$300,000. So if I just buy a property or look at a property while I'm doing my due diligence and I see that the water and sewer or other expenses are out of whack, I look at it as, oh, wow, if I was going to underwrite this the next day, once I fix those water leaks, my increase in property value gross is $200,000 or more. Now, we have made a fortune with that formula. And let me tell you the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Chris Rock said it best. He said, Shaq is rich. The guy who signs his check, he's wealthy. And I focus in the book, Harvard Can't Teach What You Learn from the Streets, on mastering the fundamentals to building lasting wealth. That's what the book gives you. And it gives you all these fundamentals. I'm trying to do an online real estate academy now, where we're going to take an actual building that I bought, a garden apartment complex, 130 units in Texas, that I bought in 2012 for $5 million, is now worth $15 to $18 million. And it didn't just get that way. There were a lot of things we did to the building, a lot of different factors that happened during those years to get it that way. But what a tremendous learning experience it will be for a lot of people.
Why is it that people who buy into multifamilies often have no clue how to do it this way?
Where are they going to learn? Through many, many years, people have said to me, I want to get into real estate. I said, why don't you? 9 out of 10 times the answer is, I wouldn't know where to start. There is no 4-year degree in real estate that I'm aware of. I think Syracuse and Indiana might be trying to start some type of program, but it's all on theory. You know, I'm talking about street success. I'm talking about experience of what goes on under the table, in the back room. Street success is what they don't teach you. You can only learn by experience. And that's what I'm trying to teach you. Hey, guys, here's the real story. Here's real life, not theory. Here's how I did it. Just follow the formula.
So, Sam, how did you get started?
Okay, so, I came from Canarsie, Brooklyn, also known as the Mafia Minor Leagues. Very tough area to grow up in, but you had to get your spider sense tingling and learn street smarts. And that's what I did. I went to school. I was a C student up until a point. A college professor changed my life by his method of teaching. And started getting A's and B's, passed the CPA test. I majored in accounting, started working for various accounting firms. And I felt like everybody's scorekeeper as their accountant. They were making millions and, I was keeping score. And I finally said, I could do this. And then I got a break. A young attorney, brilliant attorney named Bob Lee, was leaving law to start a development company. He was looking for a young accountant with some, experience. And I met him and he hired me. And in 3 years, we started with myself, Bob, and a secretary in a little office in West Orange, New Jersey. 3 years later, he had 20 million square feet in 5 different states. So I got what I call my Harvard education. And that was just based on learning. And this guy was great. He had what I call dictaphone diarrhea. Everything was a memo to memo to memo. But you learn that way. He was a tremendous mentor. And then I left as the company grew because I wanted to be my own man, not an old man. And I formed an accounting firm with a friend of mine, Neil Tepper from college, that I'm still friends and partners with. And then we represented a lot of developers and property owners. And I saw how the game was played. I said, I could do this. I had a client who was managed about 80 buildings in Manhattan. And in 1992, 93, New York City was in the toilet. And we were buying buildings. They called me in one day because they were going to form a company called Equity Resolutions. And my background was on syndications. So I had the ability, I said to these guys, I said, why, if you're going to buy all these buildings, I said, why use your own money when instead of buying 4 buildings and, running out of money, you could buy 10 buildings by doing syndications. What's that? So when I finally showed them, I streamlined the documents. We bought from 1992 to 1995 over 30 buildings. Now, the important thing to note was in those days, property values were very low, cap rates were very high, and interest rates were very high. My first building I bought in 1993, St. Mark's Place in East Village of Manhattan, We paid $575,000 for the building. Prior to that, it was in foreclosure for $3 million. So we bought that for $575,000. That building today is worth over $15 million for a lot of different reasons. But the important thing to note is that you have to buy real estate when nobody wants it. Today, everybody wants it. So when the price you pay for real estate is a permanent cost, can't change that, right? But the interest rate, which was 9.75% when I bought the property for $575,000, that interest rate now for that building would be 3.5%. And we did the same thing again in 2008 when the dot-com bubble broke. Nobody wanted real estate. Nobody wanted anything. Today, it's a different story. In those two instances, there was tremendous amount of properties. There was no money. Now we're seeing no properties available with a tremendous amount of money. So that's the differences. But if you've mastered the fundamentals and you know how to weave your way out of tough situations, you're going to be prepared for any situation that might occur. And that's what I tell people. Be a gym rat. Learn. This is your profession. Learn. Master the fundamentals. Build upon them. I compare it to a tennis instructor. If you have a talented kid and he's teaching you the backhand, there's a flaw in the backhand, but he says, okay, for the forehand, time for the backhand. Well, you know what? If you don't fix that flaw early, then you're going to go into tournaments. You might win, but there's going to be a time when that flaw is going to come out. Same thing with mastering the fundamentals. If you don't, there are going to be tough times ahead, ups and downs. And unless you've learned to master those fundamentals, you learn how to weave your way out of tough situations. These motivational preacher teachers, I call them, no money down, buy my course, you'll be a millionaire by the time you wake up. They never teach you what happens if something goes wrong. So I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who's saying, I've done this. My track record is great. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I think I'm as good as anybody, but I have the passion to teach. And that's what I'm trying to do with the book.
Sam, let me ask you this, and that is, everybody in business makes mistakes, and the successful people kind of learn from them and don't repeat them. What mistakes have you made that you've learned from you'd like to share with us?
Biggest mistake I ever made was probably picking the wrong partner in certain joint ventures we did. That you can't do. You check out a guy and then you found out he's stealing from you. Other mistakes is the properties. You learn a lot. Picking a contractor, when you don't know that much about construction and overpaying, and then find out later. A good contractor that takes on too many jobs becomes a bad contractor. These are all lessons I put in the book. How bad management or good management can make or break you. You could have the greatest deal in the world. If you don't have good management, they're going to kill it. Your deal's not going to do. You have to make people want to live at your property. That's the key. The key is a fundamental is turnover. You must reduce turnover to be successful in multifamily properties. Because if I have a tenant that's been a good tenant for 2 years, okay, if he stays and renews, I'll get a slight increase, but I don't have to pay all the expenses if he moves. So if that tenant moves, I'm going to have to repaint, fix some damage, have a waiting period until I get a new tenant, pay a broker's fee. It can cost $1,500 to $2,000 just to prep the apartment for the next tenant. So one of the fundamental keys in multifamily is to reduce turnover. And that is a key. If I see a building, when I look at a prospective building to buy, first thing I do is I look at the rent roll and I say, what percent of the building is living there at least 2 years? Because if I see a 60, 70% turnover, well, my plumbing expenses are going to be higher. My turnover expenses are going to be higher. Everything's going to be higher.
Do you have to physically leave your comfortable office in New York, travel to Houston or Dallas or wherever you're thinking of buying a multifamily property and physically look it over yourself? Or is just looking at the data all you need?
Wow, that is a great question. And this is one of the reasons why I think there's going to be Armageddon for office buildings. You don't need to live in a city to do business with a city. Now, because of Zoom, which you're on now, you're in Florida and I'm in New York, and we're not missing a beat. So the answer to your question is, as long as you have a management company or what I call boots on the ground, we do supervisory management. I don't want to manage buildings, okay, especially now. But we have meetings Wednesdays, Fridays with the management companies, and we go over numbers. Now, one of the things you have to do is always check up on a management company because they'll rob you blind. I mean, it's just human nature, especially if you have out-of-town owners. So you have to constantly look at the numbers. Remember, real estate, believe it or not, is numbers. So if you see turnover and you look at the bills, where there are 3 bids for every single capital improvement, et cetera, or a big repair. So we do a lot of, so the answer to your question actually is no and yes. You have to go down and visit sometime to make sure that the repair they say was done. But in general, no, you can do, because of Zoom and other technology, you can really limit the amount of trips you have to make and do it like we do right from my basement.
Now, Sam, if you wouldn't mind putting fresh batteries in your crystal ball, would you look ahead for the multifamily industry 5, 10 years down the road? I know predictions are predictions, but just in case you have the right battery combination, let's hear what you have to think is going to happen to your industry.
Okay. The most honest question, my honest answer I can give you is nobody knows. If anyone says, they're lying. You know, there's a Bob Dylan song called "The Answer, My Friend, is Blowing in the Wind." Now, if you give me a set of variables, the wind's going to blow left and interest rates are going to go up, and cost of construction is going to go down, or the pandemic in Europe is stabilized and people come back in this country, I can tell you which way it's going to go. However, if the wind blows right and interest rates keep changing up or down, and construction prices keep going up, et cetera, or things get overbuilt or underbuilt, I can tell you what's going to happen. The only thing I can't tell you is which way the wind's going to blow.
No,
so if you ask me in the short term, in the next 3 years or 4 years, I believe interest rates are going to go up a little. I don't think they can afford right now to. They were artificially held down. Let's face it. And I think that'll continue. And I think residential and multifamily is the darling right now. Remember, the financing. When I buy a multifamily property, it offers me the best financing imaginable. We refinanced last year a building. I got 2.5% interest fixed, 10 years interest only. And that's how people are paying all these prices, high prices, because the financing will justify it. What happens in 5 years if interest rates were 4 or 5%, which we were happy as hell to get 5 years ago? Well, then it's a change. So you have to monitor through, and you have to master these fundamentals to know which way to turn the wheel, once the storm comes. And we've been pretty good with that. But I do think there's a shortage of rental housing. That sector is going to remain very strong in the near future. Young people have changed their habits. Some of them don't want to live in a house. They would rather just rent. And they also are priced out of houses. Whereas, office buildings and retail, I think, are going to be Armageddon. I think a lot of people are afraid to invest. And what they're doing is all that money, or dry powder, we call it, is going to be diverted from office and retail into residential and driving the prices up of that too. That's my humble opinion.
Well, makes for a very interesting future, to say the least. Does that mean that with all the money out there and the few properties, that you guys are just kind of sitting and essentially studying, waiting and waiting for the markets to turn around, or what?
Well, me personally, I'm 66 years old. I might look younger. I've made a lot of money. My passion is to teach. However, if a good deal comes along, my adrenaline gets going. I personally am sitting here watching the wheels go round and round, as John Lennon wrote. I'm waiting to see what happens. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the, again, office and retail sector, just because Armageddon and collapsing. If you could buy these properties, like I bought the properties in 2008 and 1993 to 1997 or 8, you're buying them so cheap that the cycle starts again. So I think there are going to be tremendous opportunities. The difference, though, is there's a tremendous amount of money on the sidelines waiting to pounce in. So there are going to be a lot of opportunities soon. I just don't see how these office buildings and retail centers, we could do a whole show on that, are going to survive. I just don't see it.
Sam, you have certainly given us a lot of stuff to think about, but what would you like to talk about that I haven't been bright enough to ask you?
I know on this multifamily, just understand that why prices are so high. And in the book, I talk about why prices were so low, those factors. What were the factors? You know, back in the 90s, early 90s, it was, massive foreclosures, high interest rates, the dollar wasn't worth anything. Now there's another set of circumstances which are the opposite. And understand why. Biggest thing I look for now that you brought it up is the political climate. The political climate is a tremendous fundamental you must understand. For instance, in New York City right now, New York City's circling the drain. I'm not a politician, I want to get into politics, but there is a progressive movement. And in New York, you have an invisible sign, and it says 1% is real estate people, get out. You're not wanted here. In Florida and Texas, there's an invisible sign. It says, welcome, all 1%ers, all you real estate people, and you don't have to pay taxes. So the political climate is what I look at. And I don't see the political climate in New York City changing. You know, it's 8-1 registered Democrats, and of that, the city council is very progressive. Where just look at what happened in Minneapolis about 2 months ago. They passed universal rent control. Now, universal rent control is for new buildings, and that's basically limiting you. So if I want to spend $30-40 million and sign personally on a construction loan, and my construction costs have doubled because of what's going on, you can't get people to work now, and I'm going to do this and take on that risk for less reward, and my insurance costs have been going up tremendously, but you're going to limit me on how much money I can make. No way. And on that, 10 projects already stopped. So that's a political climate that I would avoid. I want to go to the states that welcome business, have less progressive policies that are pro-business. If you look at how Austin and Texas boomed, okay, and I was there in the beginning from 2007, 8, 9, 10, we bought all these buildings. It was a welcome sign. They did rezoning. They gave all these benefits. They wanted you to build. And look what they're doing. 200 people a day, I heard, are moving to Austin. And this was going on for the last 10 years. Whereas in New York City, you got 200 people a day getting the hell out.
Well, the tacos are probably better in Austin.
Yeah.
Sam, do you have a website where people can get more information about you and your book?
Yes, samliebman.com. And what we're doing right now is we're changing. I have articles I've written. We're going to be doing, we made a mistake Originally, the people that did my website were showing people on Instagram how great Sam Liebman is. No one cares how great Sam Liebman is. So we changed it now. We're changing it now to here's what we can teach you. Here's what we can do for you. So that was a mistake they made that we're changing quickly. I have these little quizzes I have that reinforce certain things. We're going to do crossword puzzles to learn real estate. There's a lot of, I've done, this is my 20th podcast. I did national television in a month. So I'm doing a lot of that. This is all new to me. I've never had training. I'm doing the best I can. My best advice is just be you, just be yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do. But in my heart, I want to help people because there's a lot of people struggling out there, especially young people. And that's our future.
You've been watching the Bizgnus Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.